In the past, silence was rare, a sacred space reserved for monks, mystics, or mourning. Today, it's a defense mechanism, a way to survive the digital storm. You've seen it. That friend who suddenly vanishes from group chats. That co-worker who stops replying, stops caring. That creator who deletes everything and disappears without a goodbye. It's not laziness, it's not rudeness, it's modern silence, and it's louder than ever. We call it ghosting, quiet quitting, digital disappearance. But it's something deeper, a quiet refusal to participate in the performance. We live in an age where everyone's watching, but no one's really seeing. We're expected to be online 24/7, available, responsive, perfect. We're told to speak our truth, but only if it's profitable, only if it fits the algorithm, only if it doesn't upset the system. So people vanish, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've been screaming into an audience that claps without listening. A generation raised on visibility is now starving for authenticity. And silence is the only thing that feels real. They ghost, not because they don't care, but because they've been exhausted by conversations that go in circles. They stop texting back, not because they're heartless, but because they're overstimulated, overworked, and emotionally bankrupt. And sometimes, silence is mercy, because anything else would be a lie. Take the phenomenon of quiet quitting. It's not laziness, it's not rebellion, it's grief. Grief for the time lost to jobs that drained them, for the energy poured into systems that never gave back, for the parts of themselves they buried under professionalism, hustle, and fake smiles. They're not quitting work, they're quitting pretending. They've seen what happens to those who give everything. Burnout, breakdowns, being replaced. The moment they falter, so they pull back, do what's required, no more, no less. And the silence they bring to that space, it's deafening. Then there's social media withdrawal, unplugging, deleting, logging off. It's not a trend, it's a cry for oxygen in a world choking on validation. Because when every moment becomes a potential post, every thought a tweet, every memory a piece of content, you begin to lose something. Something sacred. Silence becomes a rebellion against the metrics, against the likes, against the pressure to perform your pain for attention. And in that rebellion, something remarkable happens. You start to remember who you were before the noise. You remember how to feel without filters, how to think without trending topics, how to be present without being seen. It's a spiritual cleansing, a retreat into the self. Because in a world addicted to visibility, disappearance is power. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you just vanish, and those left behind feel it. Because silence, unlike words, creates space. It forces others to sit with themselves, to confront their own noise, their own emptiness. It's why ghosting hurts more than an argument, why a blocked number stings more than a harsh text, because silence removes the script. There's no comeback, no closure, no context, just absence, and absence echoes. It makes people wonder, not just about you, but about themselves. Why did they vanish? What did I miss? Was I the noise they were escaping? Modern silence is not weakness, it's a strategy, a statement, a slow withdrawal from a system that monetized your emotions and left your soul bankrupt. It says, I will no longer participate in my own exploitation. I will no longer perform healing while still bleeding. I will not speak just to fill the void. I will let the void speak to me. And the most terrifying part for society, silent people don't stay silent forever. They observe. They rebuild, they return, not with noise, but with clarity. And when they do, Their words carry the weight of absence. Their presence feels like prophecy. Their silence becomes scripture. So if you feel the pull to disappear, to log off, pull back, go still, don't resist it. You are not broken. You are awakening to a world beyond noise, to a truth that doesn't need to be broadcast, to a self that doesn't need applause to be real. You are not fading away. You are stepping into the kind of silence that makes everything else echo. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean surrender. It's not the silence of fear, not the silence of ignorance, not the silence of shame. It's the silence of strategy, of stillness. Before the storm, they call it calm, but it's not peace. It's power dressed in quiet, and it's terrifying. Because when someone who used to beg goes silent, when someone who used to argue just nods, when someone who used to fight for attention looks through you, not at you, that's not detachment, that's dominance. Calm is not weakness, it's composure sharpened by chaos. The one who screams is often still unsure, but the one who whispers, they already know they've won. In a world that thrives on reaction, outrage, emotion, explosions, silence is rebellion, because you refuse to be baited. You refuse to dance to their panic. You walk into the fire unbothered, and that shakes the system. Think about it. What frightens people more, a person yelling, or someone staring back silent, unreadable, undisturbed? That's the weaponization of calm, because silence doesn't just hold power. It shifts it. It makes the other side scramble to fill the space, to make sense of the stillness, to control what they can no longer predict. It's why tyrants fear quiet crowds more than angry mobs. An angry mob can be tamed. Their fire burns fast. But silence spreads. It festers. It plans. Look through history. The revolutions that started with whispers. The leaders who smiled calmly while their enemies raged. The prophets who said little because their silence spoke volumes. Powerful people don't flinch. They don't defend. They don't perform. They observe. They wait. They strike with timing, not noise. Because when you control your energy, you control the room. This is why emotional detachment is rising, not as a trend, but as a tactic. It's not about being cold. It's about being clear. Clarity is the ultimate threat in a world that profits off confusion. So when you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. When you stop explaining, you stop giving them weapons to use against you. When you stop trying to be understood, you become unbreakable. And that's when people notice. They notice your silence in rooms you used to fill. They feel your calm like pressure in the air. They wonder if they've lost access to something sacred, because they have. You've reclaimed your energy, and in that energy there is presence, not passive, not avoidant, but intentional. You speak only when it's time, and when you do, the world leans in, because now your voice isn't just sound, it's signal. Your calm becomes contagious and dangerous, because in a chaotic world, a calm person is a mirror. They reflect everything back. And people don't like what they see. They see their insecurities, their games, their desperation, and they realize something chilling. You're not playing anymore. You've seen the pattern. You've heard the lies. You've watched the noise devour itself. And now, you stand in the middle of the storm, not flinching. You move with purpose, not panic. You choose stillness, not submission. And that silence, it screams not at the world, but through it. Because you no longer need permission to exist. You no longer need applause to feel valid. You no longer need validation to feel powerful. You've become the thing they fear most, unshakable. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're beyond it. And that's what makes your silence dangerous. Not because it hides weakness, but because it reveals strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud. The kind that doesn't beg to be seen. The kind that changes everything by simply being there. So if the world calls you distant, cold, detached, smile, because they're finally starting to feel it. The storm you no longer feed, the game you no longer play, the fire you walk through. Without a sound, this is calm, this is control, this is silence, weaponized. There comes a moment in every human journey when the noise becomes unbearable. When the constant explanations, expectations, and performances feel like a slow betrayal of the self. And in that moment, some people break. But others, they go silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've finally realized not everyone deserves to hear your truth. Silence is no longer just a reaction. It's a philosophy, a belief that peace is found not in proving, but in preserving. And today, that belief is spreading. It's not just a habit anymore, it's a language, a new way of moving through the world. Because in an era where attention is currency, and everyone's screaming to be seen, choosing silence is choosing sovereignty. It's the act of reclaiming your identity from the marketplace of approval. It's saying, I do not exist for your entertainment. I am not here to be consumed. I am not a character in your narrative. It's choosing presence over performance, stillness over stimulation, depth over display, and it terrifies people. Because when you no longer explain yourself, people can't label you, they can't define you, can't box you in, can't use you. You become unknowable, and in a world obsessed with control, that's dangerous, because silence is not just withdrawal, it's a shield, a defense against chaos, against manipulation, against the subtle erosion of the self. It's how the quiet ones survive systems built on noise. It's how the sensitive ones protect their essence in a world that demands performance over authenticity. It's how the thinker stays sane in a society that punishes introspection. And it's how the broken rebuild, not by shouting for help, but by listening to their own voice beneath the rubble. Silence becomes their sanctuary, their temple, their strategy, their shield, but also their identity. Think about it. Some people don't just practice silence, they become it. They walk into rooms without rushing to speak. They observe before they respond. They leave things unsaid, because not everything needs reaction, and in their restraint there's power. They've learned that words, when overused, lose value. That truth, when over-explained, breeds distortion. That vulnerability, when unguarded, becomes ammunition. So they choose intentionality, minimal expression, maximum impact. They don't rush to correct every lie. They don't explain every move. They don't fight every battle. They simply exist, fully, quietly, unapologetically, and the world feels their presence louder than any speech. Because silence, when lived intentionally, is not passive. It's not retreat. It's realignment. It's saying, I am not here to react. I am here to remain. In that space, silence becomes identity, not as emptiness, but as fullness. Without noise, it becomes a mirror, reflecting back the madness of a world addicted to validation. And it becomes armor, protecting you from being dragged into wars that were never yours to fight. But above all, it becomes clarity. Because when you strip away the noise, the performances, the personas, what remains is you, unfiltered, unperformed, unmoved. That's why silence is becoming a movement. It's how modern souls rebel against distraction. It's how ancient wisdom speaks through modern minds. Because before there were words, there was stillness. Before there were arguments, there was presence. Before there was look at me, there was I am. And that's what silence brings you back to. The I am beneath all the noise. So yes, silence is a new language. A language spoken not with tongues, but with presence. Not with volume, but with vibration. Not to convince the world, but to anchor the self. It's not about saying nothing. It's about saying only what's necessary. It's not about ignoring pain. It's about refusing to let pain define you. And it's not about being mysterious. It's about being whole. So if they say you've changed, good. You've stopped explaining. Stopped entertaining. Stopped offering yourself for consumption. You've become fluent in a deeper language, a language that doesn't scream, but echoes, that doesn't argue, but resonates. And in this world of echo chambers and endless monologues, that language is revolutionary. You are no longer noise. You are frequency. You are stillness. You are the pause that makes people listen again. This is silence, not as surrender, but as sovereignty, not as avoidance, but as ascension, not as retreat, but as return to self, to truth, to power. They said silence was weakness, that it meant defeat, that it meant you had nothing left to say, that you'd lost, but they were wrong. Silence is never empty. It's charged. It's waiting for the moment. Truth will no longer be denied. Waiting for the day the quiet ones finally rise, and when they do, they don't scream. They speak, not to prove a point, but to end the conversation, because by then they've seen enough, felt enough, endured enough. The quiet ones were never blind. They were watching, recording, learning. They were archiving every betrayal behind their eyes. They were studying every manipulation in silence. And while the world mistook their calm for consent, they were preparing, not for revenge, but for clarity. Because when the quiet ones finally speak, they don't shout into the chaos, they cut through it. Their words carry the weight of every silent wound. Every time they bit their tongue to preserve peace. Every time they walked away instead of proving their worth. Their voice isn't just heard, it's felt. And it rattles the bones of those who underestimated them. Because there's something sacred about the one who chooses silence, but still knows how to speak. Their words don't come from ego, they come from depth, from alignment. From a place the loud ones have never been brave enough to go. So when the quiet ones speak, they don't ask for permission. They don't seek applause. They don't crave attention. They command it, without theatrics, without noise, without begging to be understood. They simply speak, and the world finally listens. Not because the world cares, but because suddenly it has no choice. Because truth spoken from silence is louder than lies, screamed in desperation, and once spoken, it echoes through relationships, through institutions, through systems built on distraction and deceit. The quiet ones don't return to tear it all down. They return to show it was never real. The performance, the manipulation, the noise. It was always a mask. And now their words peel it off, because silence taught them the difference between reaction and response, between noise and impact, between rage and revelation. And that's what they bring back with them, revelation. The kind that doesn't need to shout because it shifts the room, it changes the conversation, it shifts the balance of power, it makes people realize the one who walked away didn't disappear. They evolved, and now they've returned, not with vengeance, but with vision, not with a need to prove anything, but with a refusal to play small, because they found something sacred in the silence, their self, not the mask, not the version that was palatable to others, but the real, raw, unfiltered self, whole and unshakable. And when you speak from that place, you don't need to raise your voice, because your very presence speaks. You are the protest now. You are the philosophy. You are the ending they didn't see coming. You are the silence that screams. And for once, that scream isn't rage, it's release. It's the quiet thunder of someone who no longer needs the world's validation to breathe. It's the final act of someone who's not here to argue, but to reclaim their peace, reclaim their identity, reclaim the narrative. So if you are one of the quiet ones, this is your moment. You don't owe them noise, you owe them truth. You don't need the crowd, you need clarity. And when you finally decide to speak, let it not be to convince them of your worth. Let it be to remind yourself you never needed them to begin with. You were never broken, you were becoming. You were never silent. You were listening, and now you speak, not to be heard, but to be whole. Let them feel it. Let the silence scream.